Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the full review on the EAA Girsan MC14T. Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis Axe and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. And please consider supporting the channel on Player, formerly Utreon, where we can do some types of videos that are no longer allowed on YouTube. I did a kind of a first look on this when it first arrived. This is chambered in 380 ACP, and it has a 13 round magazine and holds one in the pipe. And you can see that one of the unique characteristics of this is it has a tip-up barrel. So I can click the barrel down, or I can click the barrel up. That is something that would make it easy for somebody that has issues with their hand strength to easily load a round. So I have these inert dummy rounds, they're snap caps. I can drop one of those in there and close it. And then if I want to unload it, I pop it up and I can shake the round out. So that is a feature that is kind of intended to handle that. And this is kind of a clone, or kind of an updated clone of the Beretta Cheetah 86, which had this same feature. That was available, I think, in 32 ACP and 380, and this one's only available at the moment, at least in 380. There's a few things about it. Number one, it's kind of nice looking. It's got a nice finish. It has these polymer grips that have kind of a nice texture on them. They stay in your hands well. They feel a little bit smooth, but it didn't appear slippery at the range. Kind of just nice looking, well machined. Overall, the machining on this gun is actually quite nice. Seems to be well done. They did update a few things. For example, the original 86 did not have a Picatinny rail, and you'll see this one has a 3-slot rail. So the shape of the front end was a little different, but most of the functional behavior of it and the overall design is pretty well similar. It has 3-dot sights. Sights are actually quite nice, easy to see. The rear sight is adjustable, drift adjustable, and replaceable. The front sight is molded into the frame, so the front sight is what it is. That you're not going to change. But you could either adjust or replace the rear sight if you wanted to. It does have decent beaver tail. It's not quite as long as some others. If you have thicker hands, it might actually come up over this beaver tail, and it's possible for you to get slide bit. But it does have a decent beaver tail to get up there. However, one thing I noticed about it is the overall shape of this beaver tail. It had a tendency to swat me right here. So when I fired the gun, it would kind of hit me right here. It didn't necessarily hurt. It was just kind of unpleasant. It didn't feel nice. And it didn't leave a mark on me. When Hammer fired this, though, it did end up leaving a little mark in the web of his thumb. And I've seen that in some other reviews where they talked about it. And I don't know if it's actually the beaver tail or the bottom of the safety arm. But this beaver tail setup isn't perfect for feeling during recoil. Not that 380 recoil is particularly strong, but it was enough to notice it, whereas in other guns I've fired of a similar design, they were quite comfortable and they didn't want to swat that part of my hand. The gun weighs 22.4 ounces, as you see it here with no mag in it. It weighs 24.8 ounces with the empty mag. So it's not super heavy. It's a little bit heavier than some of the Polymer Wonders that are out there, but it is an all-metal gun. It's a steel slide, steel barrel, of course, and alloy frame. The grip gives you a kind of a full 3-finger grip with the pinky extender that hangs off the bottom of the magazine. It'd kind of be a 2.5-finger grip if you had a flush base. And this pinky extender, it kind of works well. It's kind of curved in and it contours well. It does have one disadvantage. A full magazine, a full 13-round magazine, because you normally would load this with the slide closed, because if I wanted to chamber it, I would do that, can be difficult to insert, and due to this kind of hanging down like this and leaving this flat with a curve, it's difficult to use your whole palm to put the magazine in, and it's very stiff to install if it's full. So as far as kind of targeting this to people with hand issues, that's kind of a negative, because you end up having to kind of do something like this or kind of slamming it, but then this is going to bite into your hand. So that's a bit of a negative when it comes to the, kind of what the target audience for this would truly be. From a reliability perspective, we did have a few issues with it. Some of those I might attribute to break-in, and some of those I might attribute to the fact that it doesn't have an extractor. Normally there would be an extractor claw right in this area here, and there isn't one, so it relies fully on recoil to eject the round. And that can present an issue, so let me show you what that issue could present. If I chamber a round and I close it, if you've been around guns a lot, one of the things you do if you want to remove the chambered round is you pull the magazine out and you cycle the gun to remove the chambered round. Now you'll notice because I tilted the gun, the round moved, but it's still in there. I did not eject the round. So if you do kind of the classic, thing that you like to see for people that, okay, I've cleared the gun, and they don't actually look at it, you haven't actually cleared the gun. The round is still there. So with this one, you have to make it a point to tip it up and kick it back. So, kind of that little tactical clearing mechanism that I used doesn't work. Or even if you were to just lock it back. So let's say I have the barrel down. I'll do it again. I have the barrel down. I lock it back. You think it's unloaded, you've got to look. Now, of course, standard practice, safety procedure is to look, but a lot of people will take a locked back gun with this with no magazine and just make the assumption that it's unloaded. If I go ahead and close it and fire it, I just fired, if that were a live round, I would have just fired the gun. So this design, because you can't clear it by cycling it, means you have to be a little more diligent about making sure you actually look at the barrel, look at the chamber, and make sure that you have actually cleared that round. It's not a big deal necessarily once you learn how to do it, but it is different, and that could trip you up if you're working with a lot of different kinds of guns. Dimensionally, it's kind of a medium-sized gun. It's 6.8 inches front to back. It's 4.6 inches tall, and it's 1.25 inches thick. It kind of looks thicker than it really is because 1.25 isn't overly thick. The grips are comfortable, and other than that beaver tail issue, they're comfortable. But it's not necessarily small, which may be good from a recoil perspective with 380. Has an MSRP of $498, which sounds not bad till you factor in the fact that it only comes with one magazine, and the magazines are $40 a piece. So if you take, most of the modern guns are coming with two at least, usually three, and you've got to buy another couple of magazines to complete a magazine collection. That can add up fairly quickly. And in our first look, by the way, from a size perspective, we kind of put it up next to a Beretta 92 FS compact, and it was very close in size, a little bit different, a couple of dimensions, but overall very close. And of course, that's a 9mm gun. From a reliability perspective, we did have a couple issues. So first thing I did is I ran it with standard 115 round range ammo. We used Winchester White Box, and it did work. Then we put some Blazer in it, and it did work. Everything so far, so good, right? So then I decided to try some defense ammo. So we tried some Hornady Critical Duty, and that actually worked correctly fed and everything. But when we tried the Federal HydroShock, it didn't lock back on the HydroShock. So then we went and tried Hornady Zombie Max, which is very similar to the Critical Duty, and that actually had some issues, didn't lock back on the last round. But then as we kept running it, and we weren't running huge amounts of ammo, by now we're maybe 30, 40, 50 rounds into running this thing, it started to malfunction, either not lock back, or in one case it failed to cycle completely, did not fully eject the round. So what it ended up doing is, I'll kind of show you what it looked like. So I got another dummy round. These are dummy round snap caps. I'll put one in the magazine. Which, by the way, the magazine, the way the follower's set up, it's really kind of twitchy to get that first round in. What ended up happening is it cycled against the non-ejected shell and did that. So at this point, the gun is jammed. You can't tip up the barrel. You can't pull out the magazine. You've got to retract the slide and get this round pushed back into the magazine. And then you can drop the magazine and eject the round that failed to eject, which doesn't sound like a big deal. That wouldn't be any different than any other gun, except if you're targeting this to somebody that has hand issues, the slide is actually quite heavy on this. And the other thing is when you go to slide it back, there's no serrations at the front, just this recess. So you're trying to get it back, and you see what it did? It slipped in my hand. And then get it lined up on the slide stop so that I can push that round back out of the way, get the magazine out. And then now, of course, the other round is pounded in there because it had a round slam up against it. So clearing a jam on this is not as straightforward necessarily as clearing a jam on a conventional semi-automatic that doesn't have the tip-up barrel. Additionally, this didn't prove to be as reliable as I had hoped or expected. especially because I did expect some potential ammo sensitivity, but then to have it go back and start to malfunction with ammo it previously worked on was kind of odd. And that kind of also surprises me a little bit, since this is based on a design that Beretta had perfected years ago and had been around for quite a while, so I would have figured a lot of that would have been worked out. Now, given all of that, I give guns break-in periods. I would say that that may be a break-in issue. Running some additional ammo through it and a few cleanings might take care of it. But let's talk about cleanings. You can't disassemble this to clean it, not without doing gunsmith work on it. You can't do a conventional field strip. The extent of the field strip you can do on this is that. So now at this point there's a rail, of course like any other semi-automatic, there's a rail on both sides that goes all the way down, and there's rail guides in here that you can't get to. So the best you can do is reach under the barrel with a Q-tip and get whatever amount of the rails you can get with a Q-tip, and then you can lock it back and you can get part of the rail that's in here. I'll see if I can get a little bit of light in there. You can get a little bit of the rail, you can kind of get the Q-tip up in there. But really what you end up doing is cleaning it with some solvent in the few places you can get, cycling it to bring any dirt out that's up in the guts of it that you can't get to, cleaning it again and going back and forth until hopefully you get everything out that you're going to get out. That's not a limitation necessarily of just this design. The original Cheetah 86 with the pop-up barrel or tilt-up barrel was like that as well. But to me, the inability to effectively maintain it is a negative, especially since this is straight blowback and it really relies on the slide cycling at the expected rate and doing what it's expected to do. Any deviation from that's going to get you some malfunctions. Keeping in mind that this was a retail gun, bought this on the open market, so it wasn't a sample that may have been a very early release or pre-production. This is theoretically no different than what you would buy if you walked into a gun store and happened to find one. I kind of liked this gun because it has some cool factor. And it does have a decent trigger, and it has kind of an interesting manual of arms that does have some advantages. First off, it does have a thumb safety. It's ambidextrous. It's easy to operate. It goes on easy, goes off easy. Going on easy is kind of a nice one because a lot of these safeties that are way back here, they go one way real easy and they're tough the other way. This one works in both directions. Notice I've got the hammer back. So this is a cocked and locked setup. It's a double action, single action. I can also have it hammer down, and now it's a double action, and I can still put the safety on. If I put the safety on in either mode, it simply disables the trigger. So whether the hammer's back and I have the safety on or not, the trigger's simply disabled. This doesn't have the rotating ball that a lot of the Berettas have that moves the firing pin out of the way, but also at the same time it does have the internal drop safety. So this is considered a drop safe gun. Now one of the things you'll run into with these DASAs that don't have a decocker, if you want to carry them in the hammer down scenario, how do you safely get the hammer down? Because if you try to hold on to the hammer and it slips down, it could hit the round. Well, that's easy on this gun. You would pop it up. So let's say I had a round in the chamber. I pop it up so that round is well away from the firing pin. I can go ahead and put the hammer down, go ahead and thumb the safety on, put the barrel down, and now I'm hammered down safely. No risk of an unintentional discharge. Overall, this does have some cool features. I just don't think it has all of the other features that go with that would make it a good gun for somebody with compromised hand strength, or even a good gun, like a defensive gun, concealed carry gun, for somebody that doesn't have limited hand strength. In that case, the more conventional setup would be much easier. And by the way, sometimes when you go to put the barrel down, it doesn't want to latch. You have to play with it and give it a shove. So far in the video, it's worked for me every time, but a couple times at the range, it didn't want to play nicely. So let's talk about the trigger. So right now I'm going to start with double action. I got the hammer down. I got to turn the safety off if I want the trigger to work. It has a longish double action, but it's relatively light and it is very smooth. So it does have quite a nice double action trigger. And I'm going to let it all the way back out. And of course it didn't cycle, so the hammer's down. So I'm going to go ahead and cycle it to get the hammer back. You notice the hammer moved back. That's very typical of a DASA. A little bit of take up, kind of minimal. Kind of a little bit of creep, but overall a nice short break. It's not a super spectacular, awesome DASA trigger, but it is a nice DASA trigger. I'm going to hold the trigger back and cycle it again to show you the reset. The reset is about all the way out back to the single action position. And then there's some take up to get back on the wall. And then a little bit of creep, and again, a decent, nice break. Overall, I would call this a good trigger as DASAs go. It's a good trigger. In the single action mode, it's nicer than a lot of the striker fired triggers, but there's also quite a few DASAs out there, like others in the Beretta lineup, the 92, the 96. You look at some of the SIGs, like the P226, that have, I would say, awesome triggers in single action mode. This just has a good trigger in single action mode. Magazine does release decently, and it does eject nicely. Didn't have any problems with the magazine release. It is not ambi, but it is reversible. So it's got a lot of the modern features that you're looking for in guns like this. Kind of comes down to the part of, should I get one of these? Oh, one thing before I do that. Here's the control for tipping up the barrel. Kind of looks like a slide stop slide release, but you push it down and that tips up the barrel and then releases it. So coming back around, if you've got compromised hand strength and you're looking at this, because that tip-up barrel is going to be a lot easier. Yeah, the tip-up barrel part really is. Kind of the rest of living with this, dealing with the slide and some of the other things aren't. So probably not the best choice for that. If you're looking for a good concealed carry gun, there's probably better choices out on the market. I look at this as a cool gun. It's interesting. It's got some kind of collector's factor. At the $500 price, it's a reasonable price, especially if you're not needing a lot of magazines, because again, that'll add up very quickly. You start adding magazines at the price they're asking for them. I would look at this as if you're collecting and you want an interesting gun in your collection or a unique gun in your collection, this fits that. If you're seriously looking for something for compromised hand strength, or you're looking for something for defensive carry, home defense, things like that, yeah, it's a gun. It'll work for that. It's not the best choice. I would look elsewhere. There's quite a few things out there. You know, Smith & Wesson's got the EZ series that doesn't have quite the same capacity, but it has very easy to rack slides. You can look at the Shield Plus series, that's in the similar footprint. Look at the Equalizer, which is a 9mm, so that gives you the really easy to rack slide and the capacity. So there's a lot of things out there in that territory. And then of course, if you don't have the hand strength issue, things like the P365, the Hellcat, all of those that are out there are probably superior to this gun for the purpose of, you know, true intention, serious purpose. I'm using this for defense in some manner versus just something cool, something to add to my collection, something to pull out on a range day. And their price is very similar to this, especially when you figure they come with 2 to 3 magazines, and their magazines are a little less expensive to get. So that's kind of my summary on it. I do like it, but it isn't really hitting the mark for what this type of a gun would kind of be going after. Thing I almost forgot to mention, on their website they have this thing, they call it the loading assist base plate. It replaces this base plate and allows you to put one round in it. Kind of sits like this inside of a little housing. The purpose for that is you got this one round ready that you can tip up the barrel and use the magazine to hold. So I've got 13, and then I got my +1 sitting here that I can then use the magazine to insert quickly into the barrel and then put the magazine back. Kind of a cool little convenience feature. They say it's sold separately, but it's nowhere on their website. And so getting magazines and getting accessories for this initially are probably going to be difficult. And it won't even fit a lot of the original Beretta Cheetah 86 holsters because they didn't have the Picatinny rail. So the front end kind of came up, kind of streamlined, kind of like a PPK. So you're going to have, unless this thing takes off and becomes real popular, which kind of will surprise me at this point, you may have issues getting accessories. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, subscribe, check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Rumble, Getter, and also consider supporting us on Player, formerly Utreon, where we're going to be able to do videos that we can't do on YouTube anymore because of their changes in their rules. And thank you.